Again, what happens is somebody makes a few comments on my channel and I think to myself, I feel like I've known that bloke for years because he thinks a lot like me. We're from the same era. So this is for Land Rover Lance, Landy Lance. Good on you, Lance, for asking this. When you asked, you probably weren't expecting it to become a video, but what it is I've made a couple of videos about travelling on the Googs track and travelling in the outback, and Lance asked me about what tyre pressures do I run. Now if you're a city person with a city car and you never leave the bitumen, you probably, how often do you check your tyre pressures? I made a bit of a video about this once before, didn't I? Saying about how often do you check your car. And what it was about was that every time I saddle up, every single time I saddle up, I check every screw and nut and bolt and clip and hole and buckle on the reins and the saddle, because you don't want to have a stirrup break at flat gallop, which happened once, but we will tell that another time perhaps. That was an interesting story. So anyway, good old Lance, he asked me what tyre pressures do I run. And as I say, you live in suburbia with a suburban car, you probably never think about it. So you have to let your tyres down for sand work, soft work, but it's much more complicated than that. So in Australia, really harsh climate, and in South Australia, maybe 15, 17 years ago, this lovely young couple came from Germany to be tourists, and they hired a mighty Toyota Land Cruiser. You can't go wrong. You know, the advertising campaign for Toyota Land Cruiser used to be king of the road. Well, we got a Land Cruiser, had it for donkey's years, love it to bits. It's fantastic. So this couple got this hire Toyota Land Cruiser, and they went off. You go and have a look at the Simpson Desert, the Strzelecki track, those sort of places. They went off there in their Toyota Land Cruiser because it's four-wheel drive and they'll be right. And they got bogged. And when they got bogged, it's a 40-degree day, and they didn't know what to do. And time went on, and no one knew where they were, and the place was completely desolate. And a couple of days went past, and they still hadn't come back, and still nobody knew where they were. And so they got a bit panicky, and what they did is the female did the thing you should never do. She left the vehicle, and she walked on the track back to where they got the car from, started walking. So of course we'll keep the story short, and of course what happened, eventually, way overdue to get the hire car back, nobody knows where they are, we better send out a search party. And sadly, the search party finds her body, she's deceased on the track, and they find him still with the vehicle, but also deceased. The tragedy of that story is they had no experience driving a four-wheel drive. And the police officers that went to do the recovery went up to that Toyota Land Cruiser. They went up to each tyre and they went tss, and they let the tyres down until they were bagged, and they drove the Land Cruiser. That is what is so important about that story, and why it's talked about again and again in Australia in the terms of tourists coming to Australia and four-wheel driving, is that if they had only known to let the tyre pressure down, they would have driven out themselves. And that's why Land Rover Lance saw me going over these sand dunes in the Googs video and asked me what tyre pressures do I run. So firstly, let me say, I've got a magnificent Jeep, love it to bits. It came standard with BF Goodrich mud terrain tyres. Over the moon, more than happy with the tyres. One of the things I particularly like about the tyres is they are made in America. Steve, said Australia, why are you saying good things about made in America? You should be buying Australian tyres. Well, there are none. There are none. All of our tyre factories, easily get sidetracked into a long story here, but all of our tyre factories are gone. They're all shut down, and they've all gone to Asia, one place or another in Asia. So that's why I'm particularly delighted that my Jeep is made in Toledo, Ohio, And my tyres are made in either Alabama or Indiana. There's two factories, and I just haven't bothered to do this research to see which of those two make the mud terrain. But the tyres are made in either Alabama or Indiana. Woo-hoo. Okay, so again, everyone has their own opinions about tyre pressures, and so any four-wheel drivers want to make comment, I'll really appreciate it. Wheels and levers, you've talked about doing some off-roading stuff, and of course Lance yourself with a Land Rover Lance, so it'll be interesting what you think. But my BF Goodriches, I run them on the road on bitumen at 38 pounds pressure. Then when I go to dirt roads, and Australian dirt roads, massive corrugations, lots of flint, lots of mucky, dangerous stones, I drop down to about 24 to 26 pounds. And you might say, what? You're still driving on a road, you're still in two-wheel drive, and yet you're dropping your tyres down that much. So when you look at my tyres at 38 on bitumen, and then you look at them at 24, you can hardly tell they're bagged. But that's taken a lot of pressure out. And what that's about is you're driving down a road and you've got 38 dirt road, you've got 38 pound pressure. That sidewall is like a rock. And you're down to 24 and that sidewall's all baggy. And so when a sharp rock or a flint comes up, there's far more chance that I'm not sure if a balloon would be a good example, but if you had a balloon and you ran your fingernail on a half blown up balloon, you would see your fingernail just goes across that balloon and just pushes it in because it's soft. But you go to a balloon that's fully rigid and you just run your finger, bang. So that's the principle of down to 24. Now on the Googs, if this encourages you to go and watch the video that's about the dunes on the Goog, there I dropped down to 18 pounds pressure, and that was fine for that track, for that sort of sand, and it was only 26 to 28 degrees because the temperature also has a lot. It's a 40-degree day, the sand becomes worse than talc, and so I've been in some heavy dune country, went away for a weekend, heavy dune country, and there I was down to 14. Be interesting to see what people think. I spent the whole weekend at 14 pound pressure. I contemplated taking you in and showing you the tyres, because but enough's enough. That's answered the question, and probably going to cause all manner of debate between people about tyre pressures. Tyre pressures, that's a lot like horseshoes and no horseshoes. It's not really, but you get my drift. Okay, there we go. That's answered the tyre blah blah blah. That's answered the tyre pressure question. Cheers.